good. Good, good, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to our viewers online for what I think is really an historic moment, an historic conversation that we are about to embark on with my good friend and political giant in the USA, and not insignificant here too, in the UK, Reverend Keith McGee. He's literally just flown in, as a matter of fact, from Boston, not on the red eye, I'm told, but the morning flight. So you've been in the UK less than 24 hours?
Yes. Yes.
So he's punching through, and I'm sure is as excited as I am and you are to hear his musings about prophetic justice, his book, but also there might be a little issue around some kind of election going on somewhere, somewhere across the pond. Reverend Keith McGee, welcome to Homerton College.
Thank you.
And the last time I was with Reverend McGee was literally with the President of the United States. This is how he rose. Am I right or wrong?
Yes.
And hopefully by tomorrow or the next day, the new President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Can you explain where we were and what we were doing?
I thank you for the opportunity to be here at Homerton. We were in Washington at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference. Right. That's where we were. I've just termed off the board of the foundation.
Yeah. Yes.
And so the event is over a week that deals with policies that affects everyone in America, not just those within the Black Caucus.
Give our audience a snapshot on what it looks like when 10,000 African Americans from all over the country descend upon Washington, D.C. for a week.
It looks like organizational excellence. People come from all over to be a part of what is happening around legislative policy. Certainly representatives from each of the members' districts. But it is where Black intellectual thought around policy, faith, academia come together to, on an annual basis, to think through what is happening in the nation, what are the potential resolves, what are the issues that need to be confronted and addressed, and to hopefully come up with solutions.
Right.
In addition to that, it's a great social gathering. It's a time.
Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I was there, but from your lens.
Well, it's where everyone from those various walks of life in the African American community come together in social settings. Whether that's a gala that it's about 5,000 of us, or yes, whether that is a prayer breakfast that probably has 3,000 of us, or whether that's a party, an evening party that has 1,000 of us.
Yes. So let me just translate that. That a prayer meeting during this week would ordinarily start about 7:30 in the morning, and so 3,000 people show up for a prayer meeting. And as far as you can see, people are in their Sunday best for a wonderful session of prayer, of thought, of coming together, right? So this is around 7 o'clock. And then in the evening, people get ready about 8 or 9 o'clock, then to have dinner and party until 3 in the morning. And then he's back for another prayer meeting at 7.
Though I fold about 10 p.m.
Yes. But in the evening, I have to say that it pretty much looks like I'm going to put this, a Cambridge Mayball setting where you go big or go home.
Sure.
Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And every one that you can think of that's a part of the upper echelon of Black America is in the room.
Is in the room.
Whether that's a Bernice King, the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., or some entertainer, you know.
Yeah.
I couldn't begin to start naming them all. Everyone comes together for this week.
And was it of particular interest this time round, and why?
Definitely of interest this time around, and why? Because, you know, 6 weeks ahead of the gathering that's planned a year in advance, we learned that Kamala Harris had the nomination. And Kamala, having been a United States Senator, was once a member of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Correct.
So it was one of their own absolutely being a part of this.
Right. And so there was talk of her finding her voice after the convention?
Absolutely. That it was a place for her to test out her message with the base that has brought her into power to some degree. To test that out, to determine what would be some of the key messages. And there was a mobilization during that time period of top leaders meeting with her to test that out as well.
Yeah, yes. And so fast forward to today, 24 hours before America's election. Is American democracy at the precipice as we see it from here?
It is. This is a very pivotal moment.
Is that hyperbole? Is that hyperbole, or is that, are you genuinely worried about American democracy?
I've been worried about American democracy for a long time. For America to truly fulfill what it has framed in its Constitution is still a lot of work to be done. Because of this moment in time with these two particular candidates, it can go one way or the other. With Donald Trump, I think that we lose the progress that we've made as a nation in trying to fulfill the promise of what it means to have a democracy and for there to be liberty and justice for all. I think with Kamala we get closer to that, but there's still a lot of work to do. One of the things that Martin Luther King Jr. is famous for saying is that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think that the idea that there are any of America's citizens that are experiencing levels of injustice, that we have to question, why is that? And what does democracy really look like? I give some data and some facts for people to just consider as we think about this moment. We often think of America as this fully developed nation without realizing that there are 39 towns in the United States of America that does not have running water. 37 of those towns are in red districts.
What do you mean red districts?
Republican districts.
Yeah.
We often think of how could these people not get what one candidate represents over the other? How could they be, quote, ignorant? 70 years ago in America, there was something called Brown versus the Board of Education, the fight to integrate public schools. 70 years ago, there were over 2,000 school districts that closed because they didn't want to integrate. How many of those districts are still closed 70 years later? Just over 200. So you're saying, how do these people, how are they not informed? Because they're not educated. Their school districts are literally closed. All 212 are in red districts within the Republican districts. So there's an injustice that America has not fulfilled the true meaning of its ideas and its creed, right? And that is not just for communities of color or non-white Christians. there are many people in America that have been left behind. So yes, democracy is at stake here. Who's going to work aggressively to save it and to move us forward to creating the ideal of this more perfect union? I'm of the opinion it would be Kamala, more so than Donald, but with either one, there's a lot of work ahead.
Okay. I want to pause for a minute. I know we want to talk about the elections, and we want to talk about your book and the intersection between the elections and your book. But before we get there, can we talk about you?
Okay.
And how you as a businessman, as an activist, as a reverend, what's your journey in short-ish that got you to here?
I'm a reformed investment banker.
I'm sure some of you would like that. I'm going to mention no names.
My first degree is in economics, and so I started in investment banking, and within 6 weeks realized it wasn't for me.
Why?
Because I was concerned about how some of the investment models would only create more stark poverty, especially for the people that I care most about. So out of that, when you don't know what else to do, you go back to school, I guess. And so out of that, I continued education, which ultimately landed me at the World Bank.
Yeah.
And I was working on a project there called The Spirituality of Economics, looking at developing countries and what was happening with their economic systems. Out of that, I became intrigued by religion, had this sense of calling, but thought God couldn't possibly be calling me unless God had a sense of humor. And so I just thought, no, that's not for me. That's not possible that I fit into the context of the narrative of which I grew up with. And so I found myself in this space of studying religion and theology, and then being both like in the pulpit and in the academy, like trying to balance the two out. And so from there, there were two things that became of interest to me in this space of trying to look at morality and economics and justice. And one was looking at Moses and his 10 public policies as opposed to commandments, and transforming that. And the other one that really captured me was really dealing with the Christian text, where it is proposed in the King James Version that at Jesus' impending death, he's having this conversation with his disciples about this oil that could have been sold. And he says in this moment, as it was recorded, the poor you will have with you always. And I really began to interrogate that, because of course Jesus was not a Christian, he was a Jew. And so I'm thinking, did Jesus really say that? And after interrogating it, coming to realize that what he said was, the poor will be here after I'm gone. There's a difference between always and after I'm gone. So I really began down that journey to say, how do we eradicate poverty?
Right.
And so that's what brought me to this space. How do we eradicate poverty? And here are all of the issues that go into it. Here are the marginalized communities. Here's the misappropriation of text. Here is the influence on religion in the public sphere. How do we take all of that and do something with it? And so I've found myself in this space of, being a all things to all people to some degree, but between working with charity organizations and academic institutions and businesses on the same models. How do we deal with the least of these amongst us? And how do we get people to the place where there's fairness and equality for all? And so that brings me full throttle in being this social justice, academic, public, intellectual, professional agitator.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, ensconced in theology.
Exactly.
And I guess this is where the book comes in.
Yes.
Really, that pulls all of that together, and more.
Yes.
Race, religion, and politics.
Yes.
And when you consider both the USA and the UK, there's a separation of power between religion and politics, and you strongly argue that they are entwined, should be entwined, are entwined, need to be entwined.
They are entwined. Should they be? Maybe not, but they are. And I think that we have to deal with it as a real phenomenon, that religion plays a critical role in the public sphere, and we don't recognize it.
Right.
In the United States, of course, the U.S. Constitution is a secular document, and religion is only mentioned twice. Yet at the same time, in the framing of everything, from the currency, whether that's a note or a coin, from the Star Spangled Banner, is this ideal of "in God we trust." So God is there. Who's God? Right? We can talk about that. Here in England, we often say, well, there is a separation of church and state, that it does not exist. But yet, the head of the crown is the defender of the faith, is the supreme governor, right? In the House of Lords, you have 20 bishops.
Correct.
They have seats. So how can you say there's a separation? And the question becomes, if in the House of Lords you have 20 bishops, how many imams?
No.
How many rabbis?
No.
So it is infused with an ideology from your seat of government that you need to explore. And without exploring that, you're doing yourself a disservice when you have a nation that's made up of citizens that have different faiths, different cultures, different beliefs. So that's what I attempt to explore.
Sure. And part of that anomaly, I mean, I sit within the House of Lords, that you may or may not know that when we are looking at legislation in the House of Lords, and we're taking in turns to speak, if a bishop stands up, we have to, by law, sit down, or by protocol, we sit down, because that is the protocol of our proceedings. But I want to come back to something you said, because it seems to me to link in with this, and I would like to flesh this out in your thinking. You talked about the commandments that were taken and put on the tablet, and then you refer to them as policies.
Yes.
Explain.
So this idea, I've been to Mount Sinai, what an experience, right? But this idea that there's something happening where someone has to go up to spend time with God, to come back and have conversations of what God is speaking about, right? And is God speaking about what's happening with people? Is God's, these revelations that Moses comes with, were they new to the people? Or were there things happening with the people that he had to come back to help and put into context? And I propose the things that he has this revelation from Mount Sinai were things that were already happening in community. So he came back with these laws to put things in place, to have policies on how the community should respond and behave. So we call them commands from God. I say that they were policies to bring order and structure to community.
For example, thou shalt not commit adultery. What does that mean?
So you know, I've just had to really. This is one of the things I deal with. So the misappropriation of text is one of the things that gets us in trouble. The issue of this policy of thou shalt not commit adultery. You ready? Are you ready? It's because a man could have as many wives as he wanted.
Back then.
So sleeping with another man's wife, when you could have as many wives as you wanted, was illegal. You have to frame that. That's why it was an issue. Because all you had to do was marry who you wanted to marry. You could have multiple wives. You could have concubines. But if you go and sleep with the wife of another man that he's legally married to, then it becomes an issue. So that's a whole nother element of how you deal with and address what adultery was, what it meant then as opposed to what it means now, and putting it into historical context. You can't have multiple wives now. So what changed? Did the scripture change? Did the policy change? What changed? Did the sacred understanding change? Or did the policy change? I argue it's the policy.
The policy's changed.
The policies changed. That's why I say they're public policies.
Got it. And how does that help us if we see it as a policy that is changeable or interchangeable rather than a commandment set in stone that can lead us down a cul-de-sac?
Well, herein lies a major challenge, because there are people who are fundamentalists and dogmatic in how they see and understand religious texts and do not believe that it's, quote, adjustable.
Right.
But yet at the same time it is. It's constantly changing. So we have to determine within Judaism, where we get, obviously Islam and Christianity, there are 603 commandments, statutes, and laws, but for some reason we only talk about 10.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do with the other 593? Right? So those have changed. How do we decide which ones we keep sacred and the ones we change? It happens through policy. It happens through what's happening in the culture. It happens through what's going on in society. And we have to understand that and identify. There are certain cultures, at one time you could be stoned to death. Are we still stoning people to death? It's still in the text. It wasn't taken out. So how do we determine that? What changed? The culture changed, and therefore the policy changed. That gets me in trouble.
How?
Because there are people who hold religious texts so sacred that they push back and say, but this is what the Torah, the Bible, the Quran says, and we maintain this within our faith. And then I can appreciate that. My mother says all the time, Jesus hasn't changed and neither am I. And I give her major pushback that the thoughts have been framed of what Jesus was saying and thinking that have evolved over the course of time. And I think the biggest issue that we have in society in this sense of morality and justice should not be so focused on the ideal around religious texts, but the meaning of the text.
Okay. And how can we modify the meaning of the text when it comes to racial inequities, which you talk a lot about in the book, not least with George Floyd and would you call it prophetic injustice, or how would you?
Well, so I call it prophetic justice because I think the text gives us what we need in order to evolve and come together as a collective society and humanity.
Walk us through that.
I think embedded in all of our faiths, traditions, understandings, the ethos of our existence are some core principles and values around respect, love. What is it to be a sense of humanity? Love thy neighbor as thyself, right? I think that there's this perpetual theme there, and that I think there's an opportunity to build on love, to build on empathy, to build on compassion, to move us forward, to get beyond the toxic differences that polarize us and marginalize us. The Christian text, I talk about this in the book, two things. One is that this moment that we're in with white nationalism and the Ku Klux Klan is birthed out of a Methodist minister. Stone Mountain, Georgia. He goes up, he comes down, and he creates this current iteration of the Ku Klux Klan because he got that from God. Recently a white pastor in America gave an entire argument about why the, quote, black church should not be supporting Kamala Harris. And my question is, why is there a black church?
Right.
Why isn't there just a church? Well, because you didn't allow black people to pray in your church, so they had to start their own.
Sure.
So if it's one God, indivisible, right? And this whole idea, why is there so much division? And sacred text has done that. Sacred text has divided racial and ethnic groups. It has marginalized women. You know, we can go through the list. And so how do
So
we...
wasn't it then set out to be that way?
It was set out to be that way.
Or was it misinterpreted to be that way? So the argument would be is that those looking at the text, when there were white men, presumably said this will work for us and we will have a world order and we'll use the text to embed that in.
So I think we addressed two things here. I think we addressed the fact that the canonization of Scripture happened by a particular group of individuals who happened to have been white European men.
Right.
So no women were included, and no one that was not white and European was a part of the council with the text. If we're talking about the United States Constitution, there are a group of people who left a small island on the other side of the pond. I think they were identified as Puritans or something, right? They end up in America to create a new land because nobody was ever there. And so they create this new land. They find this new land and they set up a constitution.
Yep.
And that constitution happened to have been created by white Christian men.
Sure.
So how do you include other people if the framing...
Got it. So I guess what you're saying is a little bit like AI, that baggage in, baggage out.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And so what we're dealing with was the birth of a new nation, but it wasn't from a blank sheet in which everybody was included.
Absolutely.
It was from a small group of people, and now we're still reeling from those effects.
Absolutely. And so here's prophetic.
Okay.
This is why I use prophetic, because this framing of the Constitution says we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that all men are created equal.
Right.
Though they did not see women,
Or people of color.
Muslims,
Right.
you know, Jews, let's go down the list. They did not see them as equal, but it was prophetic.
Got it.
Because when you become a citizen,
Right.
you then become a part of that narrative.
Yeah.
They framed it so broadly with the intention of exclusion, but prophetically I'm there.
Is that what this book is about?
That's what that book is about in part.
Right.
Because I'm included even though you didn't intend to include.
So you're subverting the text.
I am taking the Constitution and interpreting it in a way that's present
Right.
today.
Okay.
I am taking the religious text and I'm interpreting it in a way that is present today.
Right. So fast forward today, with an election tomorrow, how might that text and direction of travel be subverted if Donald Trump wins?
So, you know, part of Donald Trump's base when he won in 2016, which I saw happening, was at 51%. 51% of his voter turnout was 80% of the white American evangelical church. So there's this base of how do we find the right person to return America to its Christian values. Now the idea that Donald Trump is the right person to return the country to its Christian values is laughable.
Right.
But at the same time, he's used that strategically. He's used that strategically to place 3 people on the courts that overturned Roe v. Wade about reproductive rights. So there's some success there in doing it that is a challenge in this moment, because, you know, one of the things he said 2 days ago is that there will be direct access to white Christians from the Oval Office to virtually have an office to define America as a Christian nation. And what does that mean? Who's Christianity? Is it mine? Because it's certainly different than what I believe, and if it's different than what I believe, does that mean I'm no longer allowed to be a Christian in America? Now, if that's me as a believer, what does that do to my Jewish or my Muslim brothers and sisters? Where does that place them?
So what's the game plan with this trajectory of subverting the rules to benefit who?
So that's why this is a very dangerous time in America, because since 1988, when I had curly hair, I've been able to call every election, and this one I can't. I've been accurate since '88. This one I can't seem to call.
But you did say to me privately that
Go on.
that you had a premonition. You had a premonition
In May?
in May
Yeah.
that none of the two candidates would win. Explain.
Now everyone's going to really know I'm strange. So I woke up in May, mid-May. Well, it was the later part of May. Tyra knows this because she's my colleague, and I think I probably shared it with Reverend Skinner and Dr. Jones. I woke up and I said, "It's not going to be either one of them." And I thought, that's strange. Where did that come from? And I called a few people and I said, I had this strange premonition. It's not going to be either one of them. And, one of our dear friends who's in the United States Congress, I called her. She said, oh, what did you eat before you went to bed? That kind of thing. And so here we are. In July, we learned that it wasn't going to be
Joe Biden.
And so I thought, is that what this means, that it's not going to be either one of them? So who knows if that's what it means, because if Donald Trump wins, then I certainly was wrong, right? So, but
if Kamala wins, he's taking the credit.
Well, I'll just say that there's some prophetic voice that's within.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Yes. A couple more questions, and then I want to open it up to the floor. There are some phenomena going on that observers this side of the pond find utterly jaw-dropping, and when we see places like Michigan and Wisconsin, in which we see Palestinians, second-generation Palestinians, second-generation Lebanese, professing to vote for Donald Trump after he said that Muslims are the enemy within. How does that work?
I'm wrestling with that one, and I've spoken with a number of my friends and colleagues in the space, and what I've heard so far is the idea around issues of gender, not wanting a woman in leadership, being part of it. I've also heard it being with the concern of America providing, military weapons and funding to Israel. But of course that happened during Donald Trump's administration as well. So there doesn't seem to be I can't get my head around it,
Right.
because
is it more to do with that Trump goes to these places and he tells people whatever they want to hear. I'm going to stop the war. You vote for me, and I will stop the war. If you vote for me, I will stop the Russia-Ukraine war. I will stop them. And people want the war to stop.
Well, I think
wars to stop. Clearly, there's a price to pay. There's not at any price. There is a price to pay. But do people want simple answers to complex?
People do want simple answers to complex questions, but there are two observations. If you stick with Donald Trump for 15 minutes, the narrative changes. So he will say he's going to stop the war, and then he's going to tell you in 15 minutes why the war is important. So if anyone is listening to him, they're going to hear this conflict within moments. Mm-hmm. No man is going to stop the war. There's a process, there's policy, there are things that have to happen. This war has always been about economics.
Right. Hold that thought. When we're talking about economics, isn't there a business fraternity in the US and here that puts their money on Trump more than they do Harris because of their own self-interest?
Absolutely. That is government, that is politics, that's how it all happens. What happens in elections are controlled by the economic base and what's going to happen. The Tories have just elected its new leader. What does her husband do?
A banker.
Interesting. How did this woman navigate through a system such as she did? Did anyone look at all the dynamics? And when it was happening, I said, it's interesting that she's on this trajectory. Where's the seed of this? And then I paused and I said, let me look at her family profile. I found her husband. I said, oh, this is in the economic interest of this country. When she rises to power, it will be about the economic interest of this country from the Tories' lens. That's how she's there.
So another question on that, and then I will open it up to the floor. Kemi Badenoch, not a full African name, has made political history of becoming the first woman of African descent to lead a major UK party. She's young, she's articulate, she's dynamic, but people of African descent here in this country are not pulling out the bunting and doing cartwheels. Why do you think that there isn't a joyous moment for Black Britain of this woman becoming leader of a political party?
I think it's because of her history and her rhetoric and the things that she said in the last couple of years that has been absolutely polar opposite of what it means to have or to be of African descent in this country. I think that that's where the problem lies, that her ideal around racial injustice and racial equality it does not line up with the facts of what has happened and what is continuing to happen to oppress people of African Caribbean descent in this country from the framing of what is called BAME here. It does not line up. And so how could people who identify in that community hear her rhetoric, her positions, and then think that she's aligned with them?
Understood. All right. Well, it's been great, and you and I, as you know, could speak for hours and still not tire.
Yes.
But we've got an audience here, and some on online too. But let's just take a series of questions. 1, 2, 3,
And then 4.
4.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry for rushing for the first question, but it's very sadly I will have to leave take a moment. Thank you so much for this great presentation. To me, it's fascinating to hear you because you belong to a breed that's almost disappeared from Europe, which is the radical man of faith. So I work in the French Revolution. During the French Revolution, the most radicals were the priests. And now the secularization of Europe means that this kind of voice is less and less heard.
Right.
So that was sort of complete. I wanted to make one point and then ask you 2 questions. election, and it's about the fact that apparently surprisingly substantive part of the black electorate is moving towards Trump more than usual. And I was wondering, is it because after all it might be the conservative aspects that you mentioned? Could it be that after all Trump has managed to project the idea that he's the one taking care of the blue collar workers and some people in the back of the ETR behind this, or is there another reason? I don't know. So that was
Yeah, so thank you for your comment in helping to further enlighten us around sacred text, the whole thing about whether or not Jesus was opposed to divorce. I argue whether or not Jesus said that or someone said he said that, but it was about economics, again. And certainly we understand how religious texts have oppressed, certainly women. So thank you for that. Take your second question first. The idea that African Americans are following Donald Trump, it is a higher number than it was. It's not as high as they're suggesting.
What percentage?
So there's somewhere they're saying around the neighborhood of 12%, and I was suggesting a long time ago that there were ways to get those folks. And there are two things, and you're spot on. One is around religion and those conservative values, and having one-issue voters that are saying, well, I am a black Christian, and this is the reason why I want to follow Donald Trump, because of some of this truth that he will bring this ideal of Christian values back. And that is probably the only true thing that is happening, because he did position the court to do that.
Right.
So that is not a lie. That's truth. That he used his power to change the court to do this. That is probably the only truth that I see.
Right.
But yes, I find it very interesting around the ideal of working class blue collar workers. In 2008, I write about this in the book in case you want it. So in 2008, I'm in Ohio, which is the state of Ohio sort of looks like America. If you're below this interstate, Motorway 70, it's like the American South. North of it, it's like the American North. Below, in 2008, I was doing work on the ground for Obama, and I met an amazing number of white men who were Obama supporters, because one said, I believe that he will understand the plight of the poor.
Right.
Fast forward to 2016, I'm in an Uber in Cleveland, Ohio, on my way to the repass for Congressman Louis Stokes, who had died, and I'm in the Uber, and this black man from the east side of Cleveland says to me, I'm going to support Donald Trump. I tipped him $100 to sit in his Uber to try to figure this out. Why would a black man from Cuyahoga County, like the most urban area, support him? It's because he believed that Donald Trump would see him as he was poor. The common theme.
Wow. Is it not just also that they see him as more charismatic?
But I think the common theme was that here's the white man in 2008 saying, a black man's going to see me. Here's a black man in 2016 saying a white man is going to see me. And what both of them want are jobs. Right?
Got it.
And so I think we have to have a conversation around blue-collar workers and how to change this narrative and how to make a more just and fair society.
Sure.
And I went too long and forgot your second question, which absolutely believe in universal income. There's enough wealth in this on this entire earth for there to be universal income, and so that there to be fairness and equality, that everyone should have a decent place to live,
But
a base income.
You're not saying everyone's equal in regard to I'm just testing this out now.
Okay.
Of course everyone's equal, but in regards to if somebody has an entrepreneurial gift, that they should earn more. We said no.
You can earn more, but you pay more.
Okay. Well,
It's one of the things that I think that deals with universal income and deals with how we create a sense of equality globally is to rethink the value of the public good. Right? When people think of public, they don't think of anything positive. You think public toilet, public housing, you don't think good. How about changing the narrative where everybody wants access to what's public? Can you imagine creating a world that you said, oh, I was in this amazing public toilet. It had marble in it. Where I was at an amazing public library. It's where I want to go. I don't want to go to my private club. Rethink the value of public. And when we rethink that,
Yeah.
then the ideal of having wealth changes.
Got it.
Because I want to have equal access to that which is public.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I think that's why.
Yeah.
Olivia was calling you that a radical preacher.
Well, I think I'm a lot like Jesus.
No. Right. Yeah. Who was the next one? Oh yes. Beg your pardon. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Reverend Professor. I'm so happy you are here with us at Cambridge, and thank you for having me, Principal Woolley. As a colleague in theology, I too have two questions, but I'll pose one and see if we have time for the second. So it strikes me that a through line in your comments really prompts a reflection on how economics and how we're observing economics in the U.S. to reveal something about a sense of insecurity that many folks in the U.S. have surrounding anywhere from education to health to, their lives in the autumn of their lives. And I just want to stick a pin there because there are some aspects of citizenship that are very fragile for U.S. citizens. My question actually has to center on the notion of the prophetic. I don't want to gloss over how you experience and understand possibility in the prophetic. Could you shed a little more light on how you understand and experience the prophetic?
Sure. So I see the prophetic as something that is representative of the past, the present, towards the future. And that it has already been revealed in some way, and we have to look to understand it, to define it, to realize it, that it is already there.
Right.
And that we have to sit with ourselves and sit with our democracies and nations to understand what these moments mean from the past to bring us here. And I believe that text reveals that to us. I also believe that there are current moments where the prophetic is being spoken to us for us to understand ways forward. I see and pray that I have a prophetic voice that is trying to build an alliance through where we are to bring us to a place of common ground. And so every time I sense and feel, from religious texts to writings to what's happening in political schemes, I try to look beyond the natural towards the spiritual to say, if we do this, how do we get there? If we think this way, how do we get there? So I'm always looking for that deeper meaning, and it's the danger, I think, of having a spiritual insight, an economic insight, a political insight. But for me, it works in the prophetic because I'm tying all of them together to say, when you have prophetic writings, that the prophets were not speaking to individuals, they were speaking to nations. And to also remember that within the prophetic, we focus within Judaism in particular, in Christianity, on the 5 major prophets. But there were 12 minor prophets, and there were other prophets that were not included. So what are those voices saying to us? Because they understood the past, the present, and they want to get us to a future, a promising future.
My second quick
Can I ask you? What is your understanding
Yeah.
of the prophetic?
So part of what was implied in the comment is, in my question, is because of our shared faith traditions and how we have seen it embodied present day, the practice of the prophetic in worship and within everyday life. And so you gestured toward it in terms of you use the language of foresight and premonition. But I've observed the ways in which he has been activated to speak in an instructive and forward-thinking manner to leaders and everyday common individuals
Right.
that have pushed them into the next season of their life.
Wow. Hold that thought then, because I want to bring in others in. Sir?
She was.
Oh, yes, she was.
So I see it easier to understand how big money bets come from. Elon Musk is massively if tariffs go on Chinese electric cars. But what's really still
Say that again, because I think that's a really relevant point that you make about big bets. Elon Musk, please explain.
Huge tariffs on electric cars, 50% on electric cars from China, which threaten obviously Tesla. But what I find so much harder to understand is how in 37 of these 39 towns that don't have running water, they're red districts. So how are these people voting for Trump and potentially carrying the election? Because my understanding too is that if the election is won, it would be, unfortunately, because of men, because of the tremendous gender gap between men and women in current polling, and because they believe it will be better for the economy.
So one thing first, if this election is won, it will be won because white women in America showed up. They are the majority of the electorate that are of voting age. So, but to your point around,
I've been saying it's the black vote.
no, it's on blacks are only 12% of America. So, 51.9% of registered eligible voters in America are white women. They have the majority impact on this election. So if it's won, it will be because white American women showed up and voted for Kamala if she wins. So, and we will need to applaud them and thank them and be grateful for them for showing up. But to your point around these towns in these districts, that is what is really baffling to me. That injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And these folks have experienced injustice. And, you know, I write for some major outlets, CNN and Time and all that, and I was asked to do an article on why black men were voting for Donald Trump. And I did the research and I walked away and said, no, I'm going to do an article on why white men are not voting for Biden. And that's what I did. So how is it that this base that the Democratic Party says it stands for has allowed this population to go towards Donald Trump?
Right.
How have the Democratic Party missed this and not gone in to open schools, to open hospitals and health centers and libraries how has that happened? And that's where I talk about the fact that America has not fulfilled its promise to all of its citizens.
Have poor white people and black people been taken for granted by the Democrats?
Yes. 39.6% of those living in poverty in America are white Americans.
Right.
Nobody's talking about it. Why not? And how do I have hope that the GOP is going to lift me out of poverty? It's because I have not trained you as an electorate to understand your value as a citizen. When I was in school in America, when we were in year 9, you took a course called civics,
Right.
which taught you about American politics. 38 states in the United States no longer require civics to graduate from high school. And you want to know why people are not informed?
Right.
They've not been educated.
Sure.
And so you have to figure out, there's something called Citizen University that I hope really takes off in America. But how do you go in and educate citizens to hold people accountable? And I'm not saying you have to go blue and Democrat. I'm saying if you're in those communities, why not hold your Republican representatives and elected officials responsible for ensuring that you have running water? Or have you been conditioned to think I'm not supposed to have running water? Like, part of this, if I can say this quickly, part of this Make America Great Again movement is tied into the idea of white privilege. And white privilege is part of the argument that comes from W.E.B. Du Bois about the psychological wage, right? That you could be white and poor and destitute and black and affluent, but because of the color of your skin, you would have more power. So those people who are living in poverty, who have no running water in schools, they're thinking there was a time when we had power. And it wasn't our education. It wasn't our running water. It was our skin. Let's make America great again for one reason alone. Don't educate us. Don't give us jobs. Don't give us hospitals. Don't give us running water. Make our skin great again. And he's bought into that. And I've not written during this entire time in any of the outlets about what's going on because I've been very careful. Because when this is over, it will have to be over by December 17th. The United States Constitution will mandate that we must know who's president by December 17th. I hope it doesn't take that long, but it's possible. I want to go for them. I want to go for the people who are in the red states, who are not educated, who do not have running water, and I don't want any of my language to have offended them when I go for them.
I mean, you make a really strong statement that make America great is make my skin color great.
Absolutely.
Again.
That's all I have.
Okay. All right. Food for thought. There were some more questions. Please. Right.
This,
yes. We've got two.
Her and
two.
then him.
Yes. You
yes.
first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's respectfully naive to, and I think the word you used were come as most likely to aggressively fight for this potential America as a fulfilling its democracy. It's potentially naive to think that anybody running for president of a country in the USA is really going to be able to fulfill that. And actually it's a much more complex, wide-based movement, particularly to the point of an injustice anywhere threatens justice. And is it really possible in that office, in the current situation, to be able to deliver justice? And then to feed that, not a second question, but a kind of follow-on, to the point about the Arab vote that was made. And I openly declare am I. Have we not fallen for that trap of the narrative of the powerful? Because the response to that question, as opposed to the response to the nuanced response to why the poor white American or the poor black American might have voted for Donald Trump,
Yep.
and how the Democrats have failed people, etc., etc. Actually, we've just smeared them as being naive and knee-jerk and have a problem with female leaders. In respect to justice, it's not really an economic wartime in the Middle East. It's ethnic cleansing. The ICC has been very clear on this. The UN is now kicked out of Palestine. Why are we not able to have that conversation? Because don't we all need to collaborate for real justice to flourish, for there to genuinely be a democracy in the United States?
Well, I'd say to you a couple of things. One, no, the next president, the next 10 presidents won't be able to completely fulfill this ideal of what every citizen having equality looks like, because it's not supposed to happen out of the Oval Office. It's supposed to happen in local communities that's making these kinds of changes, that's identifying. The president of the United States, I guarantee you, might know of the 39 towns because someone told them. I know of them. So it's the people who actually know who are going to make the difference. So that's not happening in an Oval Office. It's very unlikely to happen on Capitol Hill. So that's where we need to have that work being done. I apologize if any language I gave indicated that there was a level of naivety and created nuance that made it very simplistic about what is happening around ethnic cleansing and the genocide that's happening in Palestine, in Gaza. That is certainly not what I believe. I do believe that what we're seeing with genocide and ethnic cleansing and what that means, I do believe it's economic. I believe at the bottom, who will go in to the strip if it's completely cleaned out? Are there any plans to go in and build and rebuild and to bring economics into that region? The answer is yes. So I still see it as an economic war, and the way to win is to remove the people. But there has to be the human element of caring about the people and seeing the people as my people and understanding if it's this basic principle of this is my brother, this is my sister, and how do we build that kind of alliance? That doesn't happen in political schemes.
Thank you. Do you think, just to go back to the first point of the question, do you think that people have seen a Biden administration and not seen these great inequities that you speak about, even being talked about, much less being resolved? So people are saying, well, you've had a chance and nothing much has changed. This guy's got a magic wand. Let's give him a chance.
Donald Trump has no more of a magic wand than Biden has, and certainly there are restrictions and things that America could have done differently, and that I vehemently oppose that this administration has done. I am not sure that Donald Trump would have done any different, because there's a system in play here. And you have to understand the totality of the system and all of the workers, from commerce to the Department of Defense to energy. There's a whole system. So you have to dismantle a system to get it done. Not one person saying, Donald Trump is not going to dare go in and say, we're no longer going to give you firearms to a country that owes us how much money on the firearms we've already given them?
Right. But isn't that what she's saying? That it's pretty much rigged for whoever's in the White House because of the dynamics that lead American so-called democracy.
So Donald Trump cannot go in and create certain mandates that Congress does not approve, right? So it's not that that Biden is going to say we're no longer having the war when Congress has already passed a budget. So there are many, many elements that go into it. It's really not that simple. And I know we want it to be simple to say, you're no longer going to do this, and America is going to demand a ceasefire. But what are the elements that goes into America saying a ceasefire? What are all of the factors? And when we reveal all of the factors that goes into that, we understand how complex of a narrative it is. And I wish it was that simple. I wish there was a button that could be pressed, almost like the nuclear, right? But to say, here's how we're going to stop this.
Got it. Please, two more questions. Yep.
Just to go back to your dream. If by the 17th of December you say they've got to make a decision, from just constitutional fact, will they be forced to become, like we have in the UK and also parts of Europe, to form a collaborative government? Would we see that? Would we see two presidents in the White House if push comes to shove?
No, we would not. That's not how our Constitution works. So
Nice try.
yeah, that's not how the Constitution works. If it is not how it works. It's more complicated to explain, but understand that from the states, the Electoral College goes to the representatives in Congress that represents those states, that seats those delegates. That then has to go to the Senate, and then it is certified by the head of the Senate, who happens to be the vice president. So imagine that it has to go to the head of the Senate to determine who won.
Right.
Who's the head of the Senate? The vice president, Kamala. It's complicated.
It's complicated.
This is a very complicated moment in history.
Tell me, we spoke about the precipice and it not being hyperbole. Is there a danger that the aftermath of this election could cause bloodshed?
So, Dr. Jones, being prophetic, 8 years ago, I wrote an article that spoke about America's holy racial war. I believe we're on the precipice of it. I believe, in my strangeness, that what happened in the intention of the insurrection is only a glimpse of what America is preparing to see in the days ahead. I think there are hard days ahead for America. And it will be this racial and religious war on the ground.
Do you think that we would have had a glimpse of that if the attempted assassinator of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania was black?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, on that cheery note,
She
Hillary.
So, I've been listening to the podcast The Coming Storm, which is looking at what's been happening in the States around various conspiracy theories. And it strikes me that the poor, they don't believe that anybody is looking out for them.
Right.
And they actually believe out of control. They feel that things have been stitched up, and whether they blame, whether it's QAnon, whether they believe it's the Democrats who systematically abusing children, or whatever. There's these kind of conspiracy theories. Also, AI and control of the internet is another one. It's almost as if there's been a period where we've struggled for emancipation, and it's been decades now, and it kind of hasn't happened. And so there's a belief that there's, whether it's capitalism or patriarchy or colonialism, that things are stitched up. And you yourself, you've spoken about the system being so set that it's, you don't know where to go, and we've almost lost hope in standing together as good people fighting for justice. And I'm from a very working class community, and my community was very conservative, really conservative. I remember when I first went to university, and I met my first radical socialist, and I just thought, he was campaigning for the poor and all the rest of it. I thought, if I were to take you home to my community, they would wipe the floor with you.
Right.
You do not have a clue how people in my community live. And so, do we underestimate the poor in that they're onto something? It's not that they're stupid, or it's not as if we need to convert them to the left and to the Democrats. Actually, they're seeing that their lives are outside of their control, and they can struggle for decades, and it's stitched up in some way.
So I think that you're spot on to a degree. I think that there's a resiliency that goes with being poor, and there's a sense of survival. And I think that even to your question earlier about, these oppressed communities, I think that part of it is, what is our sense of survival? How do we survive based upon what we have and what resources are made available to us? I think that part of Brexit was the ideal of survival for people who had learned to survive in a certain way. And I think I think that was a revolution. I think that the poor said, here's our moment to have our voice and be seen. I think that's the same thing that's with this Make America Great movement on the other side, is that here we are destitute, we're poor, we're left behind. We have decided that we are a threat to your ideal of justice because of our injustice. So I don't negate that by any means. At the same time, in order for real equality to land into these communities, whether that's in the north of England and what happened because everything was being controlled by London, or whether that's what's happening in Appalachia in North Carolina in America, there are funds and there are resources that government has because we pay taxes that should be going into these communities. There's a system at play that should be taking care of citizens in these countries. That's what I'm speaking to.
Isn't the genius of people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage to position themselves as anti-establishment when they themselves are ensconced in the establishment? I mean, it's a wonderful sleight of hand that they've perfected to an art form.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is that system. That is that system that they're a part of, that they've left other people outside of. And what we have to do is educate the public and our citizens in a way that they understand what they deserve and how they can access it. That's what I'm saying. There is something that's available to you that you should have. But if no one's told you how to access it,
Right.
how do you get it? And that's what challenges me. That, you know, there were individuals in America who said, no, we don't want this kind of funding to come into our community because that funding would mean that we were supporting a particular candidate. But without that funding, you've left resources out for that community. So how do I become knowledgeable as a citizen saying, but that's not really your money, that's my money. And I want my money because I've paid taxes and other people have paid taxes for those funds to be delivered to me.
Right. Any more burning questions? I'd like the opportunity to do some book signing and we can purchase a book. There is one question that I want to ask, and see if we can collide all these thinkings together, particularly as we face tomorrow's historic election. What's going to come first, do you think? An enlightened leadership that becomes active listeners to the gross inequities that we're seeing played out, whether it's Republicans or the Democrats, or an empowered communities acutely politically illiterate that turn the almost 50% of the electorate not voting to voting and use that process to change things. What's going to come first, do you think?
So you want me to be prophetic?
See.
So I haven't been able to call this one, and I think part of the reason is because you're probably going to think I'm more strange than you're already thinking. I can see success and failure no matter what the outcome is. I can see being set so far back with a Trump win that it mobilizes people to say, what do we now have to do to really fulfill a sense of democracy? Right. That people are no longer asleep and comfortable and complacent because they think they have fairness and equality. They could wake up and say, that television station is no longer available to me. What happened? Now I've got to get off my laurels and do something. I could see that. Yeah. I could see on the opposite side of it, individuals saying, how do we do this and move forward to ensure that those who have been left behind that shouldn't have been left behind are galvanized and conscious to make decisions, not to turn them to Democrats, but to say, how can they be conscious enough to make the most informed decision? I'm in favor of a third party. I just have to figure out how to dismantle the Electoral College. So I'm absolutely in favor of a third party. So I'll be clear on that. But there are ways forward to do that. I will say this. The thing that challenged me in this moment, where I sit in this third presidential election, is that I've not had a chance as a Democrat to choose who I wanted to be my nominee.
Right. So you said it wouldn't have been Kamala
It wouldn't
Harris?
have been Kamala by far. She didn't get 1% the last time, so it wouldn't have been her for me. Hillary Clinton was given to me. I didn't have a choice. Joe Biden was handed to me because he was the only one we thought could beat Donald Trump. Now Kamala has been handed to me and given to me. And as a Democrat, I haven't gotten to choose my nominee. It has been, arguably the ideal. The Pope uses this. America has to choose between the lesser of two evils.
Right.
Taking out of context Aristotle's "the lesser of two evils" or "the greater of the good." Right. So it's not about that. It's about trying to find the greater of the good. And so now in this moment, I have to choose that Kamala is the greater of the good, but she wouldn't have been my choice.
Got it. So, yes.
Right? And so we have this moment where I think America has to wake up to say, we've got to do something different.
Yeah.
And it's not that we can do it with urgency. You see that little boy back there on the phone? That's my 10-year-old son. What I'm doing is not for him. It's for my great-grandchildren that I'll never meet.
Well, you might.
I'm old. But great-grandchildren, we've got to think about what the future inherits, not about what's happening right now.
On that positive note, this has been a wonderful discussion and a great insight. Can I thank those online watching? I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. An hour and a half has flown by, and I think that's in no small measure what you have unfolded for us in such an illuminating way. Another round of applause, please. So those online, where can they buy your book?
Amazon, what's that? Waterstone, any bookstore.
Any good bookstore.
Any good bookstore.
Thank you. And if we could have a picture with you here with your books, so we can use for our promo, would that be okay?
Sure.
For those that don't have to quickly leave, could we have a picture all together, please? Come over down
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if you come stand in the centre, and we can be. grab a book so we can give him a little promotion. Hillary, if you want, don't be forced to come in. Come on, let's have a yeah.
You don't have to be seen with the book. You don't have to be seen with me. I could be too radical for you.
That's okay. Thank you, Trish. Come in, all come in, all come in. Grab a book.
Let me grab a book.
Okay. That's it.
Am I supposed to have one?
Well, it's your book.
Okay.
Shuffle forward a bit.
Shuffle forward. That's it. Yeah. Stop hiding at the back, Hillary. Come here. That's it. There we go. That's it. Can you see? Come on, squeeze in so everybody can see. All right. Just take a gazillion pictures and then one with my camera so I can put it on LinkedIn. Thank you. That's it. Come a little closer, if you can. Good. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a good discussion.
Great
Really
discussion.
good.
The last
timely.
thing, Right, said good things will find its time. Said in your book, you said the only thing that the black man has that the white man has is power. Right. And Baldwin said, yeah, but your power is now power. Your definition of power is power over someone. Our power is power over ourselves. It's actually in the script.
It's on the script. On my desk.
It's on your desk.
It's on my desk. That's a great line.